Hey everyone, welcome back to Miniature Painting 101, a series of videos where I teach you all about miniature painting and 101 things about miniature painting. Yes. And now we are on part 35, Dark Flesh. Now, many people have been asking me how to paint dark flesh using the Citadel paints since they really don't have a perfect range for dark flesh. So we'll be going over that today, specifically cooling down the brown tones using blues. So we're going to be painting this Siege Brisbane model, all of his flesh, using a dark flesh scheme. It has already been base coated using gray liner from Reaper. Since it has a bit of a gray tint to it, feel free to use Abaddon Black if you're using Citadel. So today we're going to be using a combination of Mornfang Brown and Teclis Blue to get the base coat color. So essentially we're going to use the blue to cool down the brown, and then we're going to use a Requiem Flesh shade, go back to our base coat for a first highlight, remix the color with Lothern Blue after, and then a mix of Ungor Flesh into that mix. So essentially I'll just show you a bunch of color combinations to mimic a dark flesh scheme. So we're going to start off with our Mornfang Brown, give it a great shake as always, and we're going to put it into our palette. Now, as I mentioned, Mornfang Brown is a reddish brown. It's a really warm brown. However, dark flesh tends to have more of a cooler tone. So the way to fix this is to add a little bit of Teclis Blue. A blue will cool down the paint. So what I'm going to do is a 4-to-1 mix of Teclis Blue and Mornfang Brown. So 4 parts Mornfang Brown to 1 part Teclis Blue. And then I'm going to thin it down afterwards. After I get the perfect color, I'm going to thin it down with some thinner, because the key is when you're doing flesh tones, obviously, is to have very nice thin paints. You don't want to show your brush strokes on the flesh, and you want them to blend quite nicely together. So after this, I did thin it down with some thinner. That way it gets a great consistency. And then I applied my base coat color to the face of Siege Brisbane. As you can see here, this is a much cooler brown now. It's darker and cooler. And that is essentially the color you want to go for when painting dark flesh. So we're just going to put this color over the flesh tones. Unfortunately, only the face is the flesh tone, but we'll make do with what we have on this miniature. And the key is, once again, to get on a nice thin coat over the surface. Don't want to overwhelm the details. You want to keep the nice details since we'll be doing multiple coats of thin down paints. And here's what it looks like when it was dry. As you can see, it's a nice dark tone. And now we're going to apply a Requiem Flesh shade. And Requiem Flesh shade is essentially a dark brown as well, with a little bit of a warm tone to it. And usually I would thin down the Requiem Flesh shade for my skin tones, but not for dark flesh. I just apply it directly from the bottle to the miniature and make sure to get a nice coat over it over the surface. Now, as I said, if you want any more tones afterwards, apply a second shade, but make sure the first one's completely dry before proceeding to the second. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go right back to our original base coat combination, and we're going to focus on all the raised areas of the flesh. We're going to leave the Requiem Flesh shade in the recesses, but we're going to focus on everything else with our 4-to-1 combination of Mornfang Brown and Teclis Blue. And after that was done, I went back to the Mornfang Brown, but this time I used a different blue. I used a 4-to-1 mix of Mornfang Brown to Lothern Blue. That way, once again, the blue will cool down the brown, but it will produce a bit lighter of a color, and that's where we're going for our highlight color, obviously. You want to highlight with lighter colors in the base coats. And for this one, I basically just focused away from the recesses, so I started focusing on certain details like the cheekbones, the nose, the top of the forehead, around the cheeks, and the top of the head, and went away from the recesses and just try to get a nice gradient of colors. So near the goggles, for example, would be the darkest, towards the top of the head, which would be the lightest, because that's the light where the light source would be hitting. As you can see here, now we're building up a great set of browns over the surfaces, and it's really going to blend together quite nicely. Now, after this step, you can be done if you want. If you want to maintain a quasi-realistic skin tone with minimal exaggerations to the skin tone. But if you want to just make the details pop a little bit more on the surface and just provide a next tone, this step is for you. I recommend it. I typically do it, but I do know most people can stop after this tone. And once again, you have a great skin tone there. It's quite realistic, and it's quite realistic with the shading, as I mentioned. So now I'm going to just take a little bit of Ungor Flesh and add it to the exact mixture I just used. So it's down to a 4:1:2 ratio of Mornfang Brown to Lothern Blue to Ungor Flesh. As I said, I used about twice as much Ungor Flesh than I did the Lothern Blue, and I made sure to add a little bit of thinner afterwards because the key is, once again, to use a nice thin consistency to your paint. And for this part, I'm just going to focus on the top of the head, the nose, the cheekbones, the eyebrows, just certain details I really want to stand out and pop when looking at it. I'm just going to change the lighting here so now you can see it even better. As you can see, that the top of the head, the cheekbones, and the nose are now really standing out, and it's just a great way to add a little bit more definition to the model and just give a little bit more of a expression to it. And that's it. And now here you can see this is what Siege Brisbane looked like when he's done and the eyes are painted and his goggles are done, and he looks awesome. You can clearly see the definition, and it's a great dark color scheme using only Citadel paints. And that is what we're going for in this Miniature Painting 101. Remember, the key is thin down paints, multiple layers. So thank you so much for watching this episode of Miniature Painting 101, and stay tuned for next part 36, which is just around the corner, next week, Monday as always. But if you can't wait for next week, check out The Warp. Click on the link below for a free 14-day trial to my premium YouTube channel, where not only will you get to see the next 6 months worth of Miniature Painting 101 episodes, you'll get to see dozens of painting tutorials, more battle reports, and just some awesome wargaming content. So go ahead and check out The Warp. I think you'll really like it. So thank you so much for watching once again. Until next time, this is Jay saying, happy painting, everyone.